Hey everyone, how are you? Well, it's Monday, isn't it? Yep. Well, another planet, it may be another day and another dimension, who knows. So how are you? Good to see everyone. It tells me it is streaming live, so I'm going to assume that is the case. Greetings everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Friday. No, Monday. That's all right, folks. It was a great weekend. We got a chance to get away. And anyway, hello, all the moderators. Hello, Lois, Warrior Queen. Franny, how are you? Good to see you. Barry, David, good to see you as well. Wayne had connection problems. Hopefully not. I was actually doing about 16 different things before I got to sit down in the chair. But anyway, hope you're doing good. Let me just invoke favor upon you. Don't know how your weekend went. Don't know how your day is going. But I say for the next hour at least, then great favor is going to befall you. It's going to overcome you. It's going to overtake you. And so let you just bathe in favor today. And abundant prosperity. Prosperity, I always think of prosperity as health. If you got perfect health, you're the most wealthiest person around. You'll outlive all those others who do have the wealth. And full restoration be unto you. Nothing missing, nothing broken. Hey, Hadley, how are you doing? Great shirt. Thank you. I thought it was appropriate for the subject matter. So, yeah, some things just happen. I wanted to thank Julie, got your package, and thank you. Just some of the most beautiful crystals she sent me. Thank you. And got your tea, and wanted to let you know that. Hi, Sherry. How you doing? We're going to have Karen back on, the Queen of Quartz. So I have an email from her this morning. Looking forward to answering that. So Moonlight Herbalist, hello, how are you? Michelle, good to see you. Gemma, hello. Lost in Space, hello. I think I said hello to you, Sherry, but good to see you as well. Louise, good to see you. Monday Moon, greetings. So good to see you. So burnt the fire out of my tongue. You know, tea is great, but got to tell you. So right before we went on, I don't know how many of you are aware of what's going on. I don't know. Is this an omen? Is this just an accident? Notre Dame in Paris, burning and burning extensively, as you can see here. It's well engulfed. Looks like they had construction, probably rehabbing it. I mean, 500 plus years old. Those structures were built to stand, but yeah, so I don't know. What is that saying? It may not be saying anything, but yeah, go figure that one out. I don't know. Things are a-changing. Let's see. Have not heard anything from Patrick. I'll be needing to send him an email and see how he is doing. Wednesday, got a great show. Have a delightful person coming on. We're going to be talking about cancer. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges. I don't know a person that doesn't either have a family member, indirect or direct, a friend, associate, that isn't dealing with cancer. It's everywhere. And whether you're young or old, or in between, it's still attacking. And it attacks our species, I think, way too frequently. Who knows? They say they have, I read, and we're going to be talking about this on Wednesday, a vaccine for certain cancers. Now, it doesn't prevent you from getting it, but when you have it, it apparently will help cure you. Let's just hope that's the case. So, came across a most remarkable book. I had a chance to go this weekend and spend some time, as I said, just getting away and reading, which I love to do. And when I come across a gem, a jewel that, well, definitely only, I think only really deep thinkers would get what Julian Jaynes came up with in his thesis on the bicameral mind. And bicameral means two departments, two chambers, much like our structure of government here in the United States. And in others, there's similar. So it's like bifurcated. If you don't know what the word bifurcated is, I'll tell you, it means divided, separated. So the bicameral mind is just that. In Jaynes' book, God's Voices and the Bicameral Mind, he looked at life, and in his particular discipline, in psychology, philosophy as well, he saw that there was something missing in the way that anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, et cetera, view the development of the human brain. And we have left, he contends that we left out a very key component. He contends that it was from the bicameral mind that all religions emanated from. When I read thus far, I have to say, I think he's spot on. He contends that when the Isle of Crete literally blew out in 1400 BC, thereabout, that it changed man. And since that concentration, now he picks up on the aspect of China. We know that there were other places in the world, that there were other development of different races. This one apparently impacted, again, the Mediterranean, primarily the Eastern Mediterranean. That prior to this event, and you can read it in the tribal wars of the Hebrews, very well, it's a good textbook, that documents, it appears early man in early civilizations, their encampments typically weren't very large. There were cities, we know Damascus, Jerusalem, many cities that have had large human occupation. I'll get the word here in a second. But for the most part, we lived in villages, communes, etc. The most populations were less than 1,000. And in the early days, when, if you want to buy the story, apparently when we were hunter-gatherers, when we got this sudden ability to speak, it's part of the problem with the creation story, because it leads you to say, well, we were here and we had an automatic language. Our brains knew exactly how to vocalize, visualize, internalize a language that anthropologists have shown was never that easy. Language is anything but easy. Try learning a different language other than your native tongue. You'll see how difficult it becomes. So, taking the fairy tale away, the myth story, let's deal with reality. So, when you think about early man, how was communication done? How was thought rationalized, cognified? Language. When did we begin to get the synapses for language? Comprehension of vowels, letter, consonants. When did we get the ability to go beyond cognitive understanding of language and then advancing to clay tablets, developing cuneiforms, Sanscripts? These are remarkable advancements of Homo sapiens, and to see how we have advanced on that. But it's never really dealt with, how did language come in? How did it begin to change the belief systems that in many cases are still here today? In the video I did, the 39 First by Dr. Noah Kramer on the Sumerian culture, the strangest thing is now there are advanced theories that are saying that the Sumerians were really from China. Could be. But the strange thing is that the Sumerians were a plug and play society. We don't know how they came up with government, the arts, agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, the belief systems, their poems that today we get, the stories of Enki and Enlil. Those were poems. They weren't documents. They were poems. So, yep, Franny, I agree. So taking exactly what you were talking about, and well, just for those of you who are not seeing this, she said, those who control and define language, the elite, give a small concentration of people the ability to control a large portion of person's perception of reality. That is so freaking key. When you begin to think, all of us suffer from hallucinations. And as I get into this presentation I put together, it's an indictment on where man is today. We are a retarded species. And I use that word literally, retarded. We are backwards. Our perceptions are backwards. We have never been able, even in the midst of the technology, we are still retarded. That's why we have to depend on machines. And there's a reason for it. Jaynes, and I happen to think that he's probably correct. It's this neurosis that we're infected with. And when you begin to get down into the deeper part of this neurosis is everywhere. It's most likely one of the things that have retarded us, and retarded is the ability not to go forward. You're advancing backwards. It's why our dependence on religion. It's why our dependence on, you get bromances. You have people who idolize individuals. You have movie stars, politicians. We've got this failed part of us, and it's a failure. Because if we all realize that there is no human being greater than another one, and when you start having this admiration club that, you begin to idolize another human being, Jaynes contends that you're not progressing at all. You're actually carrying on the traits that were visible to our species as the earliest recordings that we have. And the fact that one person could control through auditory induction what appears to be large-scale hallucinations. And you get these people that participated. Let me just be candid with you. I told my wife this. This book really disturbed me in the first couple of chapters, because you realize very quickly how easily all of us are so susceptible to mass hallucinations, shared mass hallucination. And the thing about it is, the most prevalent is the auditory. And now I came out of the Christian religion. I know I've been in the faith healing thing. I mean, folks, I've seen it. I was a part of it. I was immersed into it. Listen, when a person prays, what are they praying for? What's the purpose of prayer? What? You're talking to something? And how many times, I can tell you, can't count how many times I have been in church services where someone says, I heard from the Lord. How many preachers have I ever heard stand up on the pulpit, pulling you into the pit? I had a word from God. Okay. Hey, I was right there. Presentation I'm about to do, we're going to get into this a little deeper. But what is that saying? That is saying that that person heard an audible voice inside their head, their brain, telling them whatever it was. That is mass auditorial hallucination. Because everyone in that meeting is so hyped up on endorphins already that you're going to believe it. This is a man of God. He's a prophet of God. She's a prophetess. And we accept that as completely normal. Now, if you were like I recently was in New York City, going right down Lexington Avenue, and 3 or 4 different people were walking by me having conversations, very detailed, that there was only them there. What's the difference? Are you telling me the person on the street there at Lexington and 5th was crazy, mentally ill, but the person in the church services, the religious services, standing up and saying that they've heard God speak is completely normal? How is that? How do we rationalize this so quickly as a species? And Jaynes' theory was that something happened about the second millennia. And it changed us from being a bicerebral mind to where now we individually take on that role. So with no further ado, allow me to give you the presentation. I think this is a fascinating discussion. The topic: all humans have auditory hallucinations. Now, you think about a person who is a mathematician. How many times have we heard, I heard something, this gave me the thing? How many times do you talk about musicians that come up with songs, melodies, harmonics? I mean, it's replete. So if we describe in one class of people that this is a mental illness, but somehow or another seem to make exceptions and negate the very same symptomology in what would be considered a savant, a genius, one hearing from God. So the question I'd like to ask all of you: is consciousness learned or is innate? Jaynes contends that it's learned. We are not born with consciousness. Now, I know it's, listen, don't write me, the man's dead. It's his hypothesis. And let me tell you, now it's gaining much more adaptability in the world of psychology. Think about how you learn. Is your consciousness more today than it was when you were 1 day old? Don't get all metaphysical on me. Be honest. No, you know you have changed in consciousness. Why? You've learned. Think about this. May answer a lot of the ambiguities that we face in life. So the question is the voice in my head. I mean, listen, I get downloads. Where are they coming from? Is it the fact that original thought is perceived or received? Do you have voices in your head? You'd be a liar if you said that you don't. We all do. So this is the dichotomy that Western cultures, and I can only speak to it because that's the one that I was raised in, immersed into. We have this duality of consciousness, duality of mind. You've got one protagonist who is supposed to have all the good. Then you have the antithesis, which is all the bad. But here is the conundrum of the duality of this. It's still coming from within. Bifurcated? Absolutely. How do the two hemispheres, the right and the left? Number one, balance. And when there's how to balance, and then how does one hemisphere overpower the other? There's a membrane that divides those hemispheres. It's a remarkable thing what happens at that barrier. So, when we look about hallucinations, someone I read earlier was talking about daydreams. Are they hallucinations? Are dreams hallucinations? Why is the pathological considered ill when normal has the same? So you've got personality characteristics, you got social situations. We all have the metacognition, following instructions, difficulties in social interactions, emotional disturbances. Now, the metacognition is a very interesting term because as we become more advanced in understanding storage, data, etc., we began to see the reflection on how our brains work. And so look how this works. You can take the personality characteristics, or you can take a social situation, but then that leads down to these hallucinations. Now, Jaynes contends, and what I'm interpreting on this, is that I could look at you and I could be sitting in a coffee shop sharing, a hot beverage. In fact, I had this exact conversation on Saturday. It's really odd. We could be sitting in the same room with the same amount of people around us. We both can see them. There's conversations. You and I are interacting, but there is no way that I can absolutely be assured that you are seeing the same reality that I am. I don't know if you're seeing the same patterns, the same walls, hearing the same conversations, but look at this. The hallucinations come down to a private experience. Now, here they say improperly disseminated. improperly disseminated. Physical arousal, thoughts, feelings. Now, to make this very adult, so, if you're not adult, then disregard this, go somewhere else. But so when we deal in the area of sexuality of Homo sapiens, one of the things that we have found particularly is how a hallucination, which we would call a fantasy, how they can begin to dominate both left and right hemispheres. Now, the sexuality of things, particularly in sexual arousal, is very predominant, particularly when you have the explosion of, adolescence, when you're at your peak physically. The endorphins, the hormones are all flooding. We learn from children, as children, make-believe characters. How many of us, and be honest here, parents, all children have make-believe friends, and they hear them. They see them. Now, you may say, well, no, they're make-believe. No, you suffered the very same hallucinations, because the hallucinogenic is in your head, not by an outside, as you did as a child. You've just transferred those hallucinations over into different categories now. Sexual arousal is very big. Height of athletic competition. Tiger Woods, what he did yesterday. Now, what they teach elite athletes, elite CEOs, C-level executives, etc. We go through training where you're taught how to take an image and make that image as real as the environment that you're around. In fact, you can literally shut the environment off and merely focus in on that one image. A hallucination. It changes the concept. From The Simpsons, Bart, I will not obey the voices in my head. But they're fun. They talk to us. They give us ideas. The thing is, what voice is those voices? They're most likely in your voice. So we understand the area of the brain that I like to call the God tickler. Because, how shall I say this? They have found a region of the brain that seems to be susceptible to this whole God thing. Voices. Don't do that. Go ahead. There's consequence. They just turned it to, heaven, hell. Obey. That is your key function in this life, is to obey. If you're not obeying, then you're damaged. You're somehow not normal. You are to obey. You are to obey the laws. I mean, I could really get down into this one. We all experience auditory hallucinations. All of us do. It's just that we've never been taught that. Science, psychology, religion, philosophy. We didn't want to recognize this. Why? Well, if you say a holy man, holy woman is hearing from God, you have a spiritualist who are talking to the dead. You have a brilliant physicist who said that they had a conversation and came up with a solution. It goes on and on, folks. So, in Nature Reviews in the Neuroscience, this article, you see that little round red circle? They know that they can apply electrical shock to this area. They can actually use what I would term as blockers to do two things. To shut the voices off, and they do this by chemicals. Then they found something that was really strange. They found out that if you stimulate this particular area and you have a high electromagnetic field, you're going to start talking to God. You're going to start hearing from God. You may hear from your past relatives. Yeah. Now you can block it and hear nothing. Again, by induced shock chemicals. But if you take it to another level, then you start hearing from God. Now today, we're all plugged in. And the strange thing is, again, all of these generate electromagnetic fields. So does our brains. Key areas that can be stimulated by variances in electromagnetic strength, impulses, have different effects. Neurons are thoughts. Remember, I did a whole thing on this. In your brain right now, in mine, you're listening to me. Billions, if not trillions, of things are going on that you absolutely have no control over. But those neurons are thoughts. It is said, everything you hear, sense, see, everything is nothing more than a neuron going down the synaptic pathway, being encased in an electromagnetic tunnel destined for a specific part of the brain. And the thing is, we're all locked in our own minds. It's becoming difficult, has been for many people throughout the ages. We see people that see things differently, they perceive differently, and we like to get in little cliques. And, going through high school, going through school, going through the job. We all do it all and over. I've seen it in my companies. People will form cliques. And then the next thing they start scrutinizing and, criticizing another employee, schoolmate, whatever. Why? Because we all want to believe that everyone is perceiving the same thing. It gives us safety in this. Because, if you're like the odd one, could you imagine what their world is like? So take this. Ego equals hallucinations. Ego always pulls you to enjoy the zone of fear, sorrow, and confusion. It's hard to accept, but a lot of people are addicted to fear. A lot of people are addicted to sorrow. A lot of people are addicted to living in chaos. They have to have chaos in their life in order to find any kind of normalcy. We would call it drama. It's still all about I, me. Ego is complete hallucinations of I. Ego is like drug addiction. Master guru equals gravitational force. Master guru always attracts the seekers to provide the path to enlightenment. Masters teach you. Develop an attitude, learning attitude of gratitude, an attitude of listening. Value everything as God's creation. Beneda, I think that's telepathy. Today, we live through lenses of signals, but the question has become, and we're seeing this now in the children that are immersed in this soup, this electromagnetic soup, signals. We have never seen a time where it seems a greater percentage of the general population seems to be losing it, snapping, doing stuff that, well, in society, you're taught that it's not acceptable. But many of them will say they heard the voice in their head. It's weird. So the God helmet. Yeah, there is a professor who's built this, and he says that when you put this on, you're going to get closer to God. You're going to have visions of God. You're going to have visions of heaven. You're going to see all those fears inside of you, because this is going to bring you to God. It's going to bring you to the Creator. It's going to bring it to your Creator. Your mind is going to go to places that, well, most likely never went before. It says that the voice of God. You know, in the Bible, how many times do we see, thus said the Lord spoke? To whom? Who heard this? Every Bible, every book in the Bible was written by some guy who said he heard a voice. And you accepted it as real. So what is meditation? Whose voice? Whose voice are you actually focusing in on? Are you seeking that place of where quietness is? It doesn't exist. I'll tell you why it doesn't exist. In order for it to be completely quiet, every neuron in your brain would have to stop. And if it stopped, then you ain't here no more. I think it's more, in my opinion, controlling that voice, which appears to be in my case, but discerning the voices you hear. And here is the conundrum. So you have, where I come out of, the Christian religion, you have the voice of the Holy Spirit. What? Now, I used to take this literally for granted. The voices of demons or devils. The voices of fragmented parts of you. Are they hallucinations or delusions? Are all your voices your inner voice? Or is it programming or mind control? Which voice do you hear? And don't be cavalier. You know, sometimes I see people, you try to be funny, but you're not funny. If you have to make a wisecrack comment in a serious discussion, then don't be part of the discussion. You know, we all like clowns, but there is a place for everything. So here's the point. Now, you think about this. I did. Let's say there are 7.5 billion people. You take the current belief systems of all religions thrown together. What would you say? 5 billion are immersed in religion, beliefs, practice, etc., etc. Who the hell are they listening to? What are they listening to? What are they obeying? Who are they obeying? Why are they obeying? Where does this come from? How can you distinguish one so-called voice that is supposed to be good and another voice that's somehow supposed to be of the devil or demons? And how do you distinguish those if they're not fragmented parts of you? Yet, will, and this is how humans do this, we'll cut that out. We'll exempt that. Well, brother, don't you know that in religious gatherings, there's great power that has come upon the people? No, I got people have come together. There ain't no power. It's the people come together. All right. So one stands up and says they heard from God and all the rest follow. Looks like Jaynes' theory makes more and more sense, doesn't it? And the question has to be asked, who's the originator of your voice? We were asked the question last week. Where does thought originate? Source? Whose source? What source? It's a voice. Now, is it a hallucination? By definition, it would be. I used to practice in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. The speaking and interpreting of tongues had that gift, amongst others. Many times I can remember sitting in a meeting and hearing the voice, go and tell me, go and give that person such and such money, or that person needs such and such in their lives. Where's that voice originating from? Who is that voice? And so often, it was always received as right. I think I could have probably taken any person in the room, but I can only recall the experience that I did. And in this case, happened time and time again. So who's hearing the voices? Is it me or is there something else? If spirits exist and they have voices, well, how are they talking? They don't have lungs. They apparently don't have vocal cords. Is the only way a thought? How would you distinguish the thoughts as different voices other than your own? How does that work out? People who have seen angelic visions, demonic visions, people who have said they have seen God, seen Jesus, seen Muhammad, seen whoever, Kali, I mean, a voice without speaking, then that implies directly it can only be received mentally. And if it can only be received mentally, then what is the voice inside saying? Whose voice is it again? Yours? How do you distinguish one thought from the different of what is your thought and what is something else's thought? Isn't it all still coming from you? How far does this go back with our ancestors? How did they begin to deal with this? I mean, we get tripped up on this. We think about how many of us have, as our species, that have died needlessly over religious wars, political wars, which are so often fed by the religious wars. And why the need for religion at all? What is this flaw about our species that we have to think that we have to hear a voice? and we call that voice God. How many people have been slaughtered because someone heard God said and went off at a tangent? Oh, I see. Now we got to begin to divide even this, because again, how can it be in one hand and not be on the other? And when you're praying, who's talking and who's answering? If someone is answering you, then that's a hallucination. You're hallucinating it. Now, you can sit there and stomp your feet and pound the desk and say, no, 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 no. I heard. Listen, I don't doubt you did not hear, but it's still a hallucination. Well, someone says, well, I'm psychic. I'm very telepathic. Yes, so am I. Well, what do you do on that? It's still a hallucination. I mean, outside the present point of what consciousness is primarily, is it not ego? I? Me? Yeah, it's all of us. You're not here unless ego is the primer. It's all about you, baby. This whole thing is all about you. Nothing else matters. It's just you. None of us can live another's reality. You can try to model yourself after another. You can have mentors. You can strive to become better, more disciplined, more aware. But in the end, it's all about you. Your birth was all about you. Your death is going to be all about you. And if we can get over that, then we need to say, well, then who's talking and who's answering? These are questions a lot of people don't want to answer. They don't want to think about, because, boy, when you start really looking at this, well, all right, who's talking? It's you. Who's answering? I can remember being prostrate in prayer, seeking that answer. Not many times I can say I got an answer. Who did that come from? I mean, we don't like to answer these things. The only honest answer is you. If God is speaking, then he's speaking in your voice. Well, it gets a little weird, but right, left hemisphere, which one is overruling the other? I've actually read cases where people became physically ill because of the voices. Sometimes a voice, sometimes many voices. Is this an hallucination? They have found incidences where people had tumors, and it was brought to light because of voices. Other times, nothing at all, very normal. I mean, it's the question that comes down to, as what Jaynes writes in his book. This is why God came into the situation. This is how God came about in man's perception of reality. God spoke, man obeyed. Left, right. The left hemisphere gives the command, the right hemisphere obeys. Now, this worked beautifully for thousands of years, because there was never no need for a physical manifestation of any type of deity, because they all originated in here. But the effect was, because of everyone else in the same state of mind, consciousness, it became very automatic. That's why you have kings. The king gave the order. If you were back in the days of kings and monarchs, you did not obey the king or the queen. Cost you your life. This was passed down from the very beginning. Most likely a scenario, whether it be Neanderthals or earlier, come along. Maybe when we began to come into groups for safety, always a leader. Why? That leader spoke the command. Everyone else obeyed. Today, we each speak our commands and we each obey ourselves, not necessarily outside. The insanity is believing your hallucinations are real. Religion is believing that other people's hallucinations are real. It's been the stumbling block, but it's been throughout. I like what this one said. It says, well, the Bible is not the absolute proof to me that it all works. I was told that it was written by many different people and that they all had visions sent to them by God, but who says that that wasn't a hallucination? Plus, since the Bible has been written, it has been rewritten over 10 times by others who had, you ready for this? Commands from God to rewrite it, move to translate it. So I ask the question, who are you really talking to? Next time we're going to get into how speech was taught. Was language sudden or gradual, and how did man learn it? These had huge implications on us. So, there you go. Deep. So, I'll continue as I continue to get through this. I'm halfway through this, and I have to tell you, this book, it causes for myself for you to completely reevaluate everything in metaphysics, everything in science, everything in thought, philosophy. It amazes me, as we were driving yesterday, I was telling my wife, I said, here you and I are in this contained environment called a car. I said, but yet, as we drive and we see the mountains, both of us are in two different places. We're seeing the same thing. Now we converse and we share that which we both are perceiving. That's why conversation ensues. And as we're driving on the highway, there are hundreds, thousands of others, all experiencing the same thing, but individually, each having their own voice. And again, we don't think about auditory hallucinations. It's a new concept for me. It's one I'm going to continue to ponder. When I lie in bed at night before I go on and planning out my dreams, I'm becoming more cognitively aware. There's only one voice I've always ever heard, and it's mine. I would immediately know if there was a different voice other than my own. Now, does that mean that my voice is the sole truth? Well, for each and individually, each of us, I think the answer is yes. We learn. I hope that knowledge is, in fact, consciousness is transmutable at death. There's still a lot of questions I have on that about, well, again, how does a spirit speak? If it doesn't have lungs, it doesn't have vocal cords, how does it think? How does it, you get into 1,000 of these questions, but hallucinations. Now, I've taken a lot of LSD, a lot of mescaline. I mean, way back in the day. Those were very interesting times. I learned to adapt in the physical world that I was in, tripping my butt off. Now, when you're seeing the roads just heaving and paisleys and just, yeah. But now I realize that it forced me to be disciplined in what we would call a normal environment. And as I look back on those experiences, I don't remember any other voice but my own. So, okay, well, thank you for your time. I hope that it at least brought inspiration, at least to think, well, maybe there is something to this. I think there is. I think that there is so much that we have missed. I believe our ancestors knew a lot of this. And whatever happened to us, whatever caused us to black out, whatever that was, that knowledge, we're dealing with the residuals. You and I mean, that's what we're seeking. Isn't that what, for myself, that's what I'm seeking. I don't know what truth is. I don't know if truth, I want the legal definition of truth is the highest form of reality. I haven't seen that reality. Have you? Have you experienced the highest form of reality? If you have, let me know. We'll write a book on this one, because I haven't met anyone who, quote unquote, lives in a truth reality. That'd be another good discussion, wouldn't it? All right, folks. Thank you, Stellar Core. Much appreciated. Well, thank you. The cat's awake. I appreciate it. This is a place where I hope we all can come. And I invite you on. If you're a philosopher, if you are a deep thinker, I know Joe Sapiens will be coming back on. Hey, Kindred Spirit, how are you, my love? So good to see you. Thank you. There's Brandy, all of you folks. So good to see so many of you. This is why I do this. To me, it's a joy that, yeah, I mean, I'm sitting in my office, but I know that we're communicating where we can come and think about this. We can ponder it. We can discuss it in rational minds and discover, how is that perception? How do we see and perceive these things? And I love reading new breaking theses. And I have to say, Julian Jaynes was one of the, wow, I mean, this dude, we'd all love to have coffee with. I mean, I think this guy would have been, he by the way, he spent a couple of years in prison because he refused to go to the Vietnam War. And so he had a lot of time to think. Now, he was a Harvard professor. I don't know if he actually got his PhD. He did not. So I don't know if he was not tenured. I'm adding here, but he began to look out his prison cell window, and he noticed a worm coming up out of the ground. And he stopped and thought, does that worm, is it aware of its environment, of its thought? Did the earth happen to have a thought as the worm came up? And from there, he began to put together this new theory, and I happen to think that he has a good hypothesis. So tell me what you think. Thank you, folks. Boy, this was fun, stimulating. Thank you. Yes, Ruth. Well, you know what, Franny, we ought to get you on here. I know you're in school, but send me an email. We'll bring you on. By the way, Franny's sister, who plays in Lunar Vacation, check them out on YouTube. They're really good. If you got a band you'd like to promote, bring it on. We'll show it to a few people. All right, folks. Thank you. Let me know your thoughts on this. To me, it's a fascinating new vein of thought. Auditory hallucinations. Wow. That's all I got to say about that. Folks, you are the best. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your hour with me. It's an honor. It's a privilege. I appreciate it. It's very cool. And I thank you. So hug yourself, love yourself, obey that voice inside yourself. Say, what was that? And I'll see you here tomorrow at the same time. All right, folks, be good. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.